Sebastian Cole wasn't supposed to be alone tonight, not at the biggest championship game of the season, not in a private suite meant for 10, and certainly not with a half-eaten hot dog in one hand and a soda in the other. The problem with being the CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire? Everyone assumed you wanted to be surrounded by investors and influencers, not actually enjoy anything for yourself. So, when his assistant had triple confirmed the guest list and every person bailed last minute, Sebastian shrugged, slid into a hoodie, and decided to actually feel like a normal human being for once. No assistants. No security detail. Just him, a stadium full of screaming fans, and a seat way too expensive for the ketchup stains on his jeans. Then she sat down beside him. "Excuse me," said a voice, light but firm. "I think you're in my seat." Sebastian glanced up mid-bite. She was holding a ticket and looking at him like she wasn't intimidated by his 6-foot frame or the sharp line of his jaw. Her auburn waves were pulled into a messy bun, and her eyes, hazel and full of challenge, held his gaze longer than they should have. "Well," he said, wiping his hand on a napkin, "that depends. Are you in Section A, Row 4, Seat 9? She held up her ticket. "Section A, Row 4, Seat 9. "You." He looked down at his own. "Seat 10. She slid into the seat beside him, dropped her bag to the floor, and glanced at his hot dog. "You're braver than me." "I haven't trusted stadium food since I got food poisoning in college." Sebastian laughed. "I'll take my chances. Hunger wins." She grinned, and something about that smile knocked the wind out of him. "I'm Layla Hart," she said, reaching out. "Sebastian," he replied, shaking her hand. "Just Sebastian." She raised a brow. "Just Sebastian? Like Prince or Beyoncé?" He chuckled. "Something like that." The game started, and for a while, they didn't talk. Not because it was awkward, it wasn't, but because the energy of the crowd was too good. Layla cheered with actual passion, yelling calls before the refs could, cursing under her breath when the other team scored. She was real. Not filtered. Not rehearsed. Not fake laughing at something to get his attention. She didn't know who he was. And for the first time in years, he didn't want her to. During halftime, she reached into her bag and pulled out 2 homemade cookies wrapped in a napkin. "Okay, this is going to sound weird, but I always bring snacks. Stadium prices are robbery." Sebastian blinked. "You made these?" "Baked them this morning. Oatmeal chocolate chip." "Want one?" He took a bite. "Okay, this is insane. You could sell these and make a fortune." She shrugged. "I'm a preschool teacher. My kids think I'm already a millionaire for being able to afford colored pencils." He laughed again, louder this time. "Layla, you're kind of amazing." She tilted her head. "You don't even know me." "Don't need to. Anyone who brings cookies to a stadium is already top tier in my book." She flushed slightly, and for a moment neither of them looked at the field. The second half was chaos, but they were louder. She grabbed his arm when their team scored, and he didn't pull away. When the final buzzer went off and the crowd exploded in a sea of noise, she turned to him, breathless, cheeks flushed. "We won," she said, like it was magic. "We did," he said, watching her instead of the scoreboard. And that's when it happened. For the first time since he built his company from the ground up, since the boardrooms and press conferences and empty penthouse nights, Sebastian felt something real. He didn't want her to leave. The crowd began to thin. She stood, brushing cookie crumbs from her lap. "Well, that was fun." "Wait," he said, standing too. "Let me walk you out." They stepped into the cool night air, the city lights blinking across the skyline. "You parked close?" he asked. "I took the subway." "My car's in the shop," she said, pulling her coat tighter. "I'll call you a car," he offered immediately. She narrowed her eyes. "Why?" "So you can ask for my number after." He hesitated, then smiled. "Only if the car gets 5 stars. She laughed, but her eyes softened. "All right, but only because I'm too tired to argue." They waited together on the curb. When the sleek black car pulled up, one of the few on the street that looked like it belonged in a luxury magazine, Layla blinked. "That's your idea of a regular car?" He opened the door for her. "It's just a ride." She slid in, looking at him before the door closed. "Sebastian." "Yeah, thanks. Tonight was unexpectedly great." He nodded. "It really was." As the car pulled away, he stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, the stadium lights turning off one by one behind him. He hadn't even asked for her number, and he was already thinking about how to see her again. Sebastian had never walked into a preschool before, not once, but now he stood at the entrance of Little Acorn's Learning Center, wearing a tailored navy suit and holding a cardboard box with a bright sticker that read donation. Art supplies from a friend. The receptionist eyed him like he'd walked into the wrong universe. "Can I help you?" she asked, glancing from his Italian leather shoes to the engraved cufflinks at his wrists. He cleared his throat. "I'm looking for Layla Hart." The woman's brows rose. "You're not a parent?" "No," he said quickly, then softened his voice. "Just someone who owes her a thank you." It had taken him 4 days to find her. Layla hadn't left a last name, a phone number, nothing, which meant Sebastian had to get creative. He remembered the way she'd mentioned being a preschool teacher and the clue about her car being in the shop. A few discreet calls from his assistant and a generous donation to the local education board later. He had a name and a place. "She's with her class," the receptionist said, still watching him cautiously. "You can leave the box here. I'd rather give it to her directly if that's all right." The woman hesitated, then picked up the phone and dialed an extension. A few seconds later, she said, "Layla, there's someone here to see you. He says he owes you a thank you." Sebastian waited beside a mural of finger-painted animals and alphabet letters while nursery songs played faintly from down the hall. Then the door opened and there she was, wearing a paint-smudged apron over jeans, a red bandana holding back her curls. She stopped mid-step when she saw him. "Sebastian," he smiled. "Hey." Layla's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, more like disbelief. "What are you doing here?" "I brought something," he said, holding up the box. "You said your kids thought you were rich because of colored pencils. I figured we could make that a reality." She blinked, then lifted the lid. Her mouth opened. Inside were markers, glitter, sticker packs, modeling clay, paint palettes, safety scissors, all top of the line, all brand new. "Why?" she asked, voice low. "You tracked me down. For this. I wanted to see you again," he said honestly. "And I figured crashing your classroom was more interesting than asking for your number like a normal person." Her lips parted, and for a moment she didn't say anything. Then she stepped back and motioned him in. "Well, you're already here. Want to meet 23 4-year-olds hopped up on juice boxes?" He followed her into a bright room filled with tiny chairs, crayon murals, and the faint scent of glue. The moment they entered, a little boy in a dinosaur T-shirt shouted, "Miss Layla." "Who's that?" "This is Sebastian," she said. "He brought us some new art stuff." The room erupted in cheers. Kids surrounded him like he was Santa Claus in a boardroom. One girl handed him a drawing of a purple dog, another grabbed his hand and asked if he knew how to make balloon animals. He crouched beside a little boy who was coloring outside the lines with absolute confidence. "That's a cool spaceship." "It's a dragon on Mars," the boy corrected. "Even better." Layla watched him from across the room, arms folded, a complicated expression on her face. When the kids were distracted again, she pulled him aside. "Okay, seriously, what's your deal?" she asked. Sebastian chuckled. "That's a loaded question." "No, I mean, why are you really here?" "Because this." She gestured toward the donation box. "This isn't normal first date behavior." He hesitated, then looked down at his hands. "It's not a date. Not yet. But I couldn't stop thinking about you. And I realized I didn't want that night to be the only thing we shared." She blinked. "Sebastian, I know it's crazy," he said, "but I haven't connected with anyone like that in years. You were real and funny. And you made me forget every single thing that usually keeps me up at night." She crossed her arms, but her tone softened. "You don't know anything about me." "Then let me." Before she could respond, a small explosion of glitter erupted behind them, followed by a chorus of giggles and one child announcing, "I made it snow." Layla sighed. "I have to deal with that." He nodded. "I'll get out of your way." But as he turned to leave, she said, "Wait." He looked back. "You want to grab coffee after school? Let's out? I finish at 4. A smile tugged at his mouth. "I'd like that." She gave him a look, half warning, half curiosity. "This doesn't mean I'm suddenly impressed. You still don't know the names of half the colors in our crayon box." "Challenge accepted," he said, backing toward the door. "I'll study." When he stepped out into the sunlight, Sebastian didn't care that his shoes were speckled with glitter or that a child had wiped grape juice on his sleeve. He had a date, and for once it had nothing to do with charm, money, or influence. It had everything to do with her. Layla stood just outside the coffee shop, arms folded, her eyes scanning the crowd until she spotted him weaving through pedestrians toward her. Sebastian had ditched the suit. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a leather jacket, somehow looking more like a man she might have passed on the street than the type who walked red carpets or helmed empires. Not that she knew he did either of those things. "Not yet." "You're late," she said, a teasing lilt in her voice. He nodded. "I got caught behind a wedding procession. The bride was dancing in the street. Seemed rude to honk." Her smile caught her off guard. "All right, that's a decent excuse." They stepped inside, the warm scent of roasted beans and cinnamon wrapping around them. He let her order first. She picked a honey lavender tea and a lemon bar from the display case. He raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. He simply ordered a black coffee and paid for both before she could argue. "I was going to cover mine," she said as they found a small table by the window. "Too slow," he replied, pulling out her chair. She sat, watching him settle across from her. "Do you always do that?" "What? Pay?" "No. Slip into people's lives like it's the most natural thing in the world." He tilted his head. "Should I have brought a resume?" "I don't know. It might help me figure you out." "I was hoping we'd skip the formalities," he said, resting his elbow on the table. "But if you need bullet points, I grew up in Chicago. I haven't been to a wedding since college, and I've accidentally killed 3 houseplants this year." She let out a quiet laugh, biting into the lemon bar. "That's a start." He sipped his coffee. "Your turn." "I'm not that interesting." "I'll be the judge of that." Layla considered. "I've lived in Brooklyn my whole life. I still sleep with a fan on even when it's cold. And I once tried to adopt a cat that turned out to be pregnant with 5 kittens. I kept all of them for a year." "You win," he said without hesitation. "Pregnant cat definitely beats dead houseplants." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the murmur of other customers and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine. Sebastian leaned forward slightly. "What made you become a teacher?" She didn't answer right away. "I had one when I was 7 who convinced me I could do anything. She let me paint during math and told me stories that made the world feel bigger than our block. I wanted to do that for someone else." He nodded, not filling the space with unnecessary words. "And you?" she asked. "What do you do?" He paused, but only for a second. "I run a company." She raised an eyebrow. "Doing what?" "Tech development. Software. Mostly automation tools." "You're in tech. Is that a problem?" "No," she said slowly. "Just not what I expected. You don't talk like a developer." "I haven't written code in years." "Ah, so you're the boss." "Something like that." She studied him. "You don't offer a lot of details. And you don't ask many." She sipped her tea. "Fair enough." Outside, the sky had shifted shades, the late afternoon light slipping into amber. He noticed her glance at her watch. "Somewhere to be?" "I promised my neighbor I'd help her with her twins tonight. She's got night classes." "Do you need a ride?" She shook her head. "It's a few blocks. I like walking." He didn't push. Instead, he stood as she did and held the door open when they stepped back into the street. They walked together toward her building. She didn't tell him to leave and he didn't offer to stay. But when they reached her block, she stopped. "This was nice," she said. "I agree." She looked up at him, hesitating. "You're still hiding something." "I'm not hiding," he said softly. "Just waiting." "For what?" "For you to decide I'm worth knowing." She looked down, then back up. You've got confidence. I've got nothing to lose. She opened her mouth, maybe to say goodbye, maybe to ask something else, but a voice called from a window above. Layla. The boys are already in the bath and they're trying to baptize each other with shampoo. She groaned. I've got to go. He chuckled. I'll walk away now before I get recruited. But before he turned, she reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a pen, and scribbled something on a receipt from her bag. My number, she said, handing it to him. No more detective work required. He held the slip of paper like it was something rare. Text me later, she added. But if you send me a selfie with another houseplant, I'm blocking you. Noted. And then she was gone, disappearing into the building with a wave. Sebastian stood there for a moment, the autumn air brushing against his face, the city pulsing quietly around him. For the first time in years, he felt like something was unfolding that didn't require control or manipulation or strategy. It just required honesty. And that terrifyingly might be the hardest thing he'd ever had to give. 3 weeks after the night he showed up at her school with a box of art supplies, Sebastian stood at the edge of a rooftop garden watching the city stretch out beneath him in a blur of amber and steel. The sun had just dipped behind the skyline and the air smelled faintly of roses and fresh basil from the garden beds lining the terrace. He adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal jacket, not because he was nervous he didn't get nervous, but because he had no idea what Layla would think of all this. Below, the elevator dinged open. She stepped out into the soft light, wearing a navy blouse and black jeans, curls loose around her shoulders. Her eyes swept the rooftop, lingering on the candlelit table, the string lights overhead, the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. He walked toward her. Hi. Her gaze met his. What is this? I figured you deserved a dinner that didn't involve paper cups or lemon bars. She looked around again, then back at him. This is your building, isn't it? He nodded once. I should have known, she said, stepping closer. The elevator had a key slot. And the hallway smelled like whatever people in magazine spreads probably smell like. I wanted to tell you, he said, but I didn't want to change anything. Her expression didn't harden, but it didn't soften either. You own this place? I own the company that built it. And the car that picked me up tonight? One of them. She let out a slow breath. So you're not just in tech? No, he admitted. I run Coal Dynamics. She blinked. Wait, that's her voice caught. That's your company? Yeah. Layla didn't speak right away. She walked past him to the edge of the rooftop, resting her hands on the railing. I've heard of it. You're on the news sometimes. I try to avoid it when I can. She turned toward him. Why didn't you just say something from the start? I wanted to know what it felt like to be liked for who I am when no one's watching. Not for the name. Not for the money. Just me. And what if I'd found out on my own? I was planning to tell you. Tonight. She looked down at the garden path beneath their feet. I don't care about the money, Sebastian. But I do care about honesty. I know. He stepped closer. That's why I'm telling you everything now. She studied his face. You were the one who donated that new reading center to the school, weren't you? I wanted to help. And the anonymous winter coat drive? He nodded. It was cold that week. Layla's voice was quiet. You've been showing up in ways I didn't even see. I was hoping you'd look past the ways I didn't. Silence stretched between them. The city pulsed softly below, the sky streaked with violet and gold. Then she walked over to the table he'd set, fingers grazing the edge of the white linen napkin. He followed. I know this is a lot, and I don't expect you to decide anything right now. She looked up slowly. You know what's funny? I've been waiting for the catch. Ever since that night at the game. I was hoping there wasn't one. Turns out there wasn't. She paused. But there was a billionaire. I didn't plan that part. Her lips curved. Good. Because if you had, I would have made you eat cafeteria pizza for a week as punishment. He laughed, and the tension between them cracked open, replaced with something warmer, fuller. She glanced at the table. So, what's for dinner? Chef-prepared truffle risotto and hand-rolled ravioli. Unless you'd prefer a hot dog. She tilted her head. Only if it comes with glitter and a preschooler screaming in my ear. I can arrange that. They sat down. The evening unfolded with quiet ease, wine glasses clinking. Stories traded over candlelight, laughter spilling into the wind. He told her about the first time he coded something at age 12. How he'd grown up in a neighborhood with flickering streetlights and a cracked basketball court. How he'd once built his first computer out of parts he found in a junkyard. She told him about growing up above her aunt's bakery, how she'd learned to bake before she could ride a bike, how she'd never been on a plane but always wanted to see the northern lights. I can make that happen, he said. Layla shook her head. Don't say it unless you mean it. I've never meant anything more. After dessert chocolate mousse with fresh raspberries, he walked her to the private elevator. She stopped before stepping in. This was the best date I've ever had, she said. I'm glad. But it also raised the bar so high I'm afraid to let you plan anything else. He stepped closer. Then I guess I'll just have to keep surprising you. I'm not used to this, she admitted. Which part? Being seen like this. Being chosen like this. You were never invisible to me. She stared at him, and for the first time she didn't look guarded. She looked open. Sure. Like the weight she'd been carrying had finally shifted. When she leaned in, it wasn't hesitant. It wasn't cautious. It was certain. Their kiss was quiet fire, the kind that lingers long after the wind has blown through. When she pulled back, her voice was barely a whisper. Don't disappear on me. I won't. The elevator doors opened behind her. She stepped in, eyes still on his. As they closed, she said, Tell me when you're ready for the northern lights. He didn't move until the soft ding of the elevator faded. Later that night, a single message arrived through his assistant's line. Layla had said yes to the weekend trip he'd arranged. Reykjavik. Northern lights. No media. No boardrooms. Just him and the woman who'd become the only thing in his life not planned, not predicted, and absolutely perfect. And as his jet began to fuel, Sebastian knew with complete certainty that moment in the stadium wasn't luck. It was the beginning of everything. Snow drifted gently across the Icelandic sky, catching in Layla's curls as she stepped out of the private SUV and looked up in stunned silence. The air was crisp, the sky faintly tinted with green ribbons of light that shimmered like silk across the stars. The northern lights weren't just visible, they were dancing. She turned to Sebastian, breath fogging in the cold. This doesn't even feel real. He didn't look at the sky. He was watching her. Neither did you. Until you happened. They stood at the edge of a secluded lodge nestled between dark volcanic cliffs and a frozen lake. The structure glowed from within, warm lights flickering through frosted windows, the scent of cedar and pine drifting from the chimney. Sebastian reached for her hand. Come inside. The interior was all soft textures and quiet luxury, hand-woven rugs, cashmere throws, a wood-burning fireplace that crackled with low heat. A table had been set near the windows, where 2 glasses of mulled wine steamed beside a platter of roasted pears and cinnamon bread. Layla walked through the space slowly, pausing near a framed black and white photograph of the aurora taken from the same cliff outside. You rented this whole place? He nodded. Just for us. She turned, her voice low. You keep doing that. Giving me more than I know what to do with. I'm not trying to impress you. I know. That's what makes it worse. Sebastian stepped closer. You make me want to give. That's different than trying to buy someone's affection. She leaned against the window, watching the lights shift above the lake. You know, I used to think love was supposed to be small. Quiet. Something you didn't talk about too loudly. And now I think maybe I was just around the wrong people. He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out something wrapped in velvet. I didn't come here just for the view. Her eyes dropped to the small box. Sebastian. He didn't open it. He held it gently like it was something fragile. I know we haven't done things the traditional way, but you've already changed my life. I don't want to spend another day wondering what it would be like to wake up next to you every morning. Layla didn't speak. Her eyes were wide, but not afraid, just full of the kind of emotion that can't be hidden behind jokes or hesitation. I'm not asking for perfect, he continued. I just want real. I want days with glitter in my shoes and nights where you steal half the blankets. I want the noise, the chaos, the parts we figure out as we go. She took a slow breath. You're serious? I've never been more. He opened the box. Inside was a ring that didn't scream wealth, it whispered meaning. A single diamond nestled in a setting shaped like a falling star, delicate and intentional. She reached out, touching it with the lightest brush of her fingers. It's beautiful. It reminded me of you, something rare and impossible to look away from. She looked up. I've never said yes to anything this fast in my life. His smile was quiet. Then I'll say it for both of us. She leaned into him, arms wrapping around his neck as her forehead rested against his. Yes. He kissed her, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that felt like a vow all its own. They didn't rush the evening. They ate by the fire, wrapped in a shared blanket, watching the aurora dance and fade and return again. Later, Layla curled into his side, her fingers tracing the inside of his palm. You know, she murmured, I used to think a life like this was reserved for other people. People born into it. People who looked the part. You belong here more than anyone I've ever known. She smiled, eyes half closed. If we're doing this, I want it to be ours. Not some public spectacle. Just you and me and maybe some kids running wild with glitter in their hair. He kissed her temple. Then that's exactly what we'll have. They stayed a week, no headlines, no meetings, no interruptions. Just snow, silence, and the warmth of something growing deeper than either of them had expected. When they returned to New York, the wedding was held at her aunt's old bakery, now renovated with Sebastian's help into a cozy event space. The scent of sugar and fresh bread filled the air as Layla walked down the aisle in a gown that shimmered like moonlight. Her old preschool class, now a chorus of excited voices, threw paper petals from handmade baskets. The vows were simple. Honest. No grand speeches, just promises exchanged between two people who had already learned what it meant to show up for each other. Afterward, they danced to a song she'd once played in her classroom during cleanup time. He didn't know the words, but he held her like they were written for her. The world didn't stop, but it did soften. Months later, she stood in their new home, a brownstone in Brooklyn that still echoed with the sound of unpacked boxes, and watched Sebastian chase a toddler down the hallway. Her niece, temporarily living with them while her sister recovered from surgery, squealed with laughter as Sebastian lifted her into the air, spinning her until she shrieked with joy. Layla leaned in the doorway, heart full. He glanced up, breathless. I think she's faster than me. She's 4. I'm still outmatched. She crossed the room, wrapping her arms around him from behind. You're good at this. I'm good at you. Later that night, after the house was quiet and the dishes were done, they sat on the front steps, sharing a mug of tea under the street lamp glow. Sebastian looked over at her. Still glad you sat in the wrong seat that night? She nudged his shoulder. Still glad you stole my hot dog. He laced his fingers through hers. Then I guess we're even. And in the quiet that followed, there was nothing left unsaid. Nothing unfinished. Just love, settled and certain, woven into the rhythm of their days, no longer unexpected, but exactly where it belonged.